Hi guys, how are you doing today? Hope you are having a sunny day. Ready for some news stories I have for you today? Let's go to the first one, about OP's wife, who had an affair and is pregnant with affair partner's baby, but still wants the house that she thinks belongs to OP. Listen to the story, guys, to find out all the details, and of course to hear my insights. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, don't forget to leave a comment. I'm from the UK, so we don't do prenups, and after marriage, property is split. Doesn't matter who owned it first. My parents aren't super rich, but were able to buy 3 properties, in which one of them they let me live in free with my ex-wife. She never asked me if I owned the property, and assumed I had been given it by my parents for free. Property is still in their names. My wife and I have been married for 13 years, and have 2 children, 9 male and 16 female. Both of us work and make the same income. She had started seeing her coworker and is 7 months pregnant with his child. He wants nothing to do with the child. The divorce proceedings have just started, and she has asked that I buy her out of the share of the house so she could purchase her own, or I let her purchase me out. I may have been the a-hole, as I laughed in her and her lawyer's face and said I do not own the house and it belonged to my parents. Both her and her lawyer were gobsmacked and tried everything in the books to try and get spousal joint asset on it, as we have been living there so long. Did not work. I've moved back in with my parents, and my 16-year-old has chosen to stay with me. It's a big enough house, while we have split custody of our 13-year-old. My parents have served her with eviction notice. She is spilling her guts to everyone on how she has been cheated out of a home and will be homeless while pregnant. Her side of the family and friends are calling me evil for allowing a pregnant woman to get evicted and also possibly lose custody of our son. Well, people who are shaming OP should take her in. As for her being pregnant, that is on her affair partner. OP should keep reminding them that she slept with another man that impregnated her while still married to OP. She took advantage of OP and fully intended to rip OP off and start a new life with OP's money. It's not OP's fault she wasn't smart enough to find out if the house was even OP's to start with. And now let's see if the community agrees with me. Artificial says, not the a-hole. Ironically, she cheated herself out of a house. Illustrious Shirt 569 says, not the a-hole. She assumed financial assets that didn't exist. I'm not sure how that's your fault. However, I have a hard time understanding what kind of bizarre financial management arrangement you two shared that meant that it was impossible for her to know or notice that you did not own the house you were living in for 13 plus years. For instance, a family member owns the house I live in, so the property taxes, fire insurance, etc. arrive in someone else's name, even though we pay them. Daft Cow says, not the a-hole. Her family and friends that are calling you an a-hole can step up to help her find a new place to live. You don't owe her anything, except being a good parent to your kids. My father passed away 5 years ago, and I loved my dad. I'm still grieving him, and in my life, no one can ever compensate for his physical absence. My fiancé knows that. He has a different relationship with his father as his dad divorced his mom and moved to another city when he was only 2 years old. He now has 3 half-brothers. He only reconnected with his father 2 years ago after his second wife, his half-sibling's mom, divorced him. At that time, we were friends, and I was supportive about their relationship, as I didn't want him to have any regrets. However, over the last 2 years, his relationship with his father has definitely cooled down after excessive intrusion from his father when it comes to our relationship. Last week, he found out that we were getting married and called my fiancé saying that he had something important to tell us. We met him a few days later, and where he practically started begging me to let him walk me down the aisle. Now, mind you, I'm Hindu, and the only reason I'm having a white wedding is because my significant other is white, and I wanted to respect both cultures. His desire comes from the fact that he lost his firstborn, my fiancé's older sister, and didn't get to see her before she died. It was an accident, because he lived in another city with his wife and kids. My fiancé was 14, and his sister was 19. It was really traumatic for my fiancé and my mother-in-law. Apparently, he sees his daughter in me, wants me to call him dad. I call my mother-in-law mama because that's what my fiancé calls her, and now wants to walk me down the aisle. I always felt he was too intrusive and invested in our relationship, and his request sent me over the edge. I told him that I respect his feelings, but that he wasn't my dad, and that his newfound relationship with my significant other won't guilt me into letting him walk me down the aisle. I also told him that I wouldn't be comfortable calling him dad, and that my dad is the only dad in my life, and he fully raised me from ages 0 to 25 years. When he kept insisting and started emotionally blackmailing my significant other, I angrily told him to knock someone up, make a new daughter, and leave me alone. He started ugly crying and left the restaurant. He is now mad at me and is refusing to come to our wedding. Am I the a-hole? In my opinion, OP's fiancé had to get really ugly to shut his dad down. Dad asked to walk OP down the aisle, and OP politely declined, and that should have been the end of it. If OP's future father-in-law doesn't know how to take no for an answer, then it is about time he learns. If he now wants to ugly cry, pout, and won't go to his own son's wedding, well, that is on him. And maybe it's even better for OP this way. And now let's hear the community's opinion. Lazy Haunt says, not the a-hole, but if you do get walked down the aisle, it would be pretty brilliant to have your mom and mother-in-law do it. Kelso Bobelso says, not the a-hole. What he asked of you was inappropriate to begin with. He asked you to walk you down the aisle and justified this ask because you remind him of his daughter? Not only is he trying to hijack your wedding, he's making it about grieving his daughter that he chose to move away from. You explained to him politely that it was a no, and he kept pushing. Sometimes people are better left outside of our lives, and it seems like he may be one of those persons. Joxum13 says, not the a-hole. This is what I like to call the consequences of overstepping a boundary. Did it have to happen? Yes. Was it the best way? Debatable, but understandable. This wasn't his place, and acting like a master manipulator didn't help his cause. What I really want to know is what your fiancé did, said, or thought about all of this. Why didn't he stop it? Why didn't he enforce the boundary himself? My wife, Katie, was with Brendan for over a decade. They started dating the first year of high school, stayed together throughout college, graduated from the same school, and got married right after graduating. Katie is an only child and, in a way, was adopted by Brendan's family. They traveled together, attended family events, etc. She is part of the family. Brendan passed away in an accident 6 years ago, and Katie and his family have maintained an extremely close relationship. I never met him since I only met my wife about a year after his death. But I've met his family many times, and they are all good people. However, I'm becoming a bit uncomfortable with how much they are trying to involve themselves in our lives. Katie and I have an 18-month-old daughter, and my wife wants her to become close to her cousins, Brendan's siblings' kids. Brendan's mother insisted that my daughter call her Grammy. During a family gathering a few months ago, Brendan's parents were speaking to mine about my daughter and referred to her as our grandchild. My parents were so uncomfortable that they spoke to me about it afterward. This all kind of came to a head recently because Katie is currently pregnant with our second child. She called Brendan's parents, and they were ecstatic about another grandchild. I spoke with Katie a few days ago about having my sister come to visit on a certain date to help out, meet the baby. And she told me, "Oh no, we can't do that date. That's when Brendan's sister is visiting." And I almost lost it. I've tried not to say much out of respect for Brendan and the fact that my wife still cares deeply about him and his family. But these people are not our family. They are not Katie's parents. They are not related to her. To me, they're just family friends, but they're acting like aunts, uncles, and grandparents. I want to say something, but I'm not sure how. They're all good people and are clearly still grieving in their own ways. But this is my family, not theirs. How can I voice my concerns without upsetting anyone? It sounds like OP's wife considers Brendan's family her family. They have clearly been in her life for a long time, so for her, these are aunts, uncles, and grandparents to her kids. They are her found family, family she chose. So I think OP should stop being weird about it and let more people love his kids. And now let's hear the community's opinion. Charlie Worrells says, "Respectfully, I think you're getting caught up in the Brendan aspect of this. Your wife doesn't have any other family. These people are the closest thing she has to parents and siblings. That, by default, means they're the closest thing your kids will have to a maternal extended family. I don't think that's a bad thing, and I think it can exist outside of her late husband." Unleashed 99 says, "Where I think you are confused here is that you didn't marry a woman with an ex. You married a widow. She's fully a part of his family. She never divorced her last husband and was never removed from that family. You have a larger extended family than most. Embrace it. Otherwise, you will likely lose your marriage over it. Asking her to choose you over her literal family, yes, to her this is her family, will likely cause the eventual end of your marriage. As long as they treat you with the respect you deserve, try to appreciate the extra love your family has. Get some individual therapy to work through the complexity of jealousy if you can't do it on your own. It shows strength to reach for help. Good luck. 16 years ago, my husband and I were married with a 1-year-old little girl. We were high school sweethearts that went to different schools, met junior year and made it work. Where we went to different schools, I met John through my husband, but never met Sarah or Cindy. Still haven't met them in real life. One night, my daughter and I spent the night at my sister's house with her 2 kids because her husband was out of town for work and she was heavily pregnant and needed help the night he would be gone. That night, my husband's best friend John, been friends since 2nd grade, came over to our house to hang out with him. Next day, my husband told me John's ex-girlfriend, Sarah, and her best friend Cindy came over to see John. John was already with a new girlfriend, Sandy, and that while John slept with Sarah in our spare bedroom, Cindy had tried to sleep with my tipsy husband. He kicked them out at like 2 a.m. My husband turned Cindy down, but apparently she had always had a crush on my husband. For a year afterward, she would call his phone. Didn't know how she got his number. We changed his number twice. She kept getting it and calling, playing music, saying lewd things, even sending emails saying how our daughter needed to be put down, so she didn't end up being a bee like me. Kept sending updates on where I went, asked how my doctor's appointment was, how store name was, creepy stalker stuff. For the longest time, I refused to leave the house without my husband because I was seriously concerned they would hurt my daughter. For a year, I felt trapped in my home. I vividly remember being 3 weeks postpartum after an emergency C-section with our 2nd child, and just holding my baby and sliding down the wall to sit and cry, because she had called again. It was 2 or 3 times a week she would call. She always blocked her number and sent the emails from an anonymous email address. For a while, I thought maybe my husband was talking to her. How else would she be getting his new numbers? I lost so much faith in him. I know he was mad about the situation and would scream into the phone to leave us alone. I saved every call log, email, and recorded what I could. I sent an email to her throwaway and said I knew who she was and that I was going to the police for harassment. Spoiler alert, I already tried, but there wasn't enough evidence because she blocked her number and nothing traced back to her. However, we were 20, she was 19, and it scared her enough to leave us alone. 3 months of peace later, and his best friend John came over with Sandy for dinner. Sandy and I were friends and would talk about everything with the crazies, as we called them. She asked how everything with Cindy was going, and I asked her how she forgave John for sleeping with Sarah. She lost it because she didn't know. He lies, says he didn't, and that my husband got it wrong, that they were just talking. Sandy didn't believe him, and then John screamed at me. This is why I kept giving Cindy his number. She would be a better match for him. My husband threw John out, and they yelled at each other outside for a while. Turns out, John was upset my husband wasn't going out and partying with him. John thought it was me not allowing my husband to go. But that wasn't true. My husband didn't want to go. He preferred to be home with me and our daughter. The few times he went out with John, I practically had to kick him out of the house to get him to go. John couldn't understand it was my husband who didn't want to go clubbing. My husband has never been a clubbing guy. He hates people and loud music. He kicked John out of our lives that night, and husband hasn't spoken to him since. We changed his number one last time and never had any other issues. For her part, Cindy got some serious karma. I couldn't help but laugh when I learned she married a guy a year later, had a kid, and got cheated on, and then he left her for another woman while she was pregnant. I usually don't enjoy others' misfortunes. However, after the hell she put us through, especially during my pregnancy with our 2nd child, I laughed when I heard. For John, he married Sandy, has 2 kids now, and tried to get back in contact with us 13 years ago after he had his first kid. He wanted to apologize because apparently, after having his own kid, he realized how screwed up he was, doing what he did. He called my husband's parents because they still had a landline at the time. My in-laws had already been told years earlier what happened, and that under no circumstances were they to give out our numbers to him. So we went to my in-laws, and my husband called him back and told him to never contact our family again. Side note, when husband called John back, we found out Cindy wasn't following us like we thought. John was telling her where we were going. So screw you, John. You and that psycho Cindy. Coy says, I can't believe Sandy married him. She is very forgiving, definitely. I Love Narcoa says, I'm not surprised such a psychopath managed to manipulate Sandy to marry him. Dude only realized he was ducked up after he had children of his own. Like, what the duck? I wonder if Sandy's marriage with John is a happy one too. Let alone if he's still cheating. Hopefully not, because Sandy sounds too sweet for someone like John. Agitated Fun says, wow, Sandy is the definition of pathetic. Cindy is a completely empty individual that's desperate for companionship because she has no personality of her own and needs someone else to imitate. John was just a pathetic, bitter man-child that never really knew your husband at all. Man, you guys are surrounded by a community cesspool. You guys need to just leave.